Hello, everybody. Really good to have you here today. Welcome to episode number 8 of the Bad Apples podcast. Today we'll be handling Rousseau, and by we, I mean my lovely self and my co-host here, Christopher Carrion.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome, all you lovely people. I see we actually have some live listeners, so we are not exactly shouting into the void. Hello, everyone. Shout out, Texas is beautiful. Mr. Keo, Libertarian, Lewis. Thanks for coming along, everyone. It's lovely to have you here tonight.
We active in the chat. We have engagement.
We have engaged. We have found the engagement. We've been searching for it for so long, and it was in the last place we looked. You know, the engagement was inside us the entire time.
Speaking of which, I want to say that you guys liking, subscribing, and share this content, absolutely fantastic. But what I'm really going to dig in the next couple of weeks as we go potentially beyond 100 subs, because we're currently at 90, any comments with any and all feedback, absolutely welcome. As we hope to scale up this channel, I want to make sure that we get it right from the off so that we're ready for anything. So anything that makes you laugh, anything that makes you cry, anything you enjoy, anything that you don't, please feel free to leave it in the comments and it will be taken on board during the week. So
yes, we without further ado, feedback, your tasty feedback.
We want to suck your feedback. Okay,
yes, we do.
So I think we'll open with a bit of biopic of Rousseau. So I'll hand it over to Carrion for a moment.
So indeed, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at the proto-communist himself. In the red corner, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the man who gave us the general will, who prioritized the idea of the state of nature, and like all bad ideas, was of course French. Rousseau is known primarily as being a counterpoint, particularly to Hobbes, but also to Locke. He had a view of the state of nature that was very, very different to these other two thinkers. He thought that essentially man was fundamentally good, and it was society that made him evil. He had a very, very cozy and sort of rosy view of man in the state of nature. He was like kind of like the proto hippie. You know what I mean? He thought that, you know, man in a state of nature was like peace and love, man. And
bunnies.
If people weren't just so hung up on society, man, everything would be great. His ideas, of course, went on to found the basis of ideologies that wound up killing millions of people. So, I guess
how corrupting is society? How corrupting can it be?
Indeed,
I mean, seriously.
And how confusing can you get when you abolish the idea of hierarchy, essentially, which is one of the ideas that Rousseau was really into. Anyway, onto a little potted history. Rousseau was born in 1712 in French-speaking Geneva. He was entirely self-taught, which is quite impressive. Moved to Paris in 1742 at the age of 30 and befriended leading members of the French Enlightenment. This was widely regarded as the point at which everything went wrong, of course. Wrote
it was all downhill from there.
Wrote prolifically on education, science, the arts, literature, and philosophy between 1736 and his death in 1778, only 10 years before the French Revolution, which would take his ideas and kill a whole bunch of people.
With them, yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant. He was very, very much writing against Hobbes and Locke, as I said, but he was considered an outsider in Paris. He did not like the commercial society and the ideas of the French Enlightenment. He saw, indeed, modern civilization as being fundamentally flawed. And as I said, many of his ideas came to power the French Revolution.
Did he have a lot of Did he have a lot of influence on other thinkers at the time? Because I never actually caught wind of that.
Yes, he did. He was very, very much taken up by the French revolutionary thinkers and the idea of a popular sovereignty through direct democracy, the idea that a state wasn't really needed, that the state could be essentially overthrown. He had a very, very weird trick going on, which still doesn't make sense, nor to me, nor to a lot of other people who have questioned his ideas. The idea that you didn't really need a state, you just needed popular sovereignty via direct democracy, and whatever the majority of the people decided was correct, an idea that he called the general will, it was always right and virtuous. Evidently, had he lived to see the French Revolution, he may have reconsidered some of these ideas, because essentially the big problem with direct democracy, as we have seen in the years since, is that 60% of the people might just vote to kill the other 40%. And this is, essentially why you have the idea of representative democracy, so that there are limits on the passions of the crowd, as it were. So if
I seem to recall having read him this week, the Social Contract essay. He wasn't a huge fan of representatives, from what I can remember.
No, indeed he was not. Rousseau believed that representative government was essentially slavery, and that if you had representatives, you are basically a slave up until the point when there is a vote. It is only when there is a vote that you have any power, and so thus in the intervening period, the people are slaves. Now, this is kind of true. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Rousseau commented on has truths in it. The real problem is that, as history has shown, there aren't many other workable forms of government. As bad as representative government tends to be, and don't get me wrong,
there are problems.
System. Indeed, there is no perfect system. All of the other systems tend to be worse, is the problem. And this idea of seeking a sort of perfect formulation for society was very, very much a 17th and early 18th century sort of, pursuit. Both, even Machiavelli was partially about this idea, what is the best kind of society that we can have? And much ink was spilt over this idea, and indeed the idea of the social contract. How do people come together to live in a society, and what rights and obligations must they bring up? This is called social contract theory, and indeed has been the subject of our last two shows, Hobbes and Locke, where we have dealt very, very loosely with these ideas. But let's face it, if you want academia, go to fucking university. This is a goddamn podcast.
It is, yes, it is indeed. I mean, this is the thing. You have to contrast Hobbes with Rousseau in terms of their lives as well, because he never got to see his ideas in action. Hobbes was basically in the thick of a kind of war of thought around just in the midst of wars. I mean, Rousseau had the luxury of being able to self-teach him a bunch of things.
Well,
teach
correct.
himself a bunch of things. Excuse me.
Unlike Hobbes, and to a lesser extent Locke, but definitely Hobbes, Rousseau did not grow up in an environment of civil war. He grew up in a milieu of essentially mercantile comfort, and some would say, I would say that in some ways he echoes many of the modern SJWs that, growing up in a life of luxury and comfort, are obsessed with the small perfections that they see in the world around them, and start believing that what you really, really need is to rip everything down and start again. Whereas Hobbes, of course, would basically say to Rousseau, have you seen what the fuck this brings about, you goddamn idiot? But of course, Hobbes was dead by then. So he couldn't really, go to Paris and slap Rousseau around the head with a large trout
and tell him to tidy his fucking room.
Sorry?
It would have been great to see Hobbes slap him around the face and be like, tidy your goddamn room, bucko. Have you seen the wars outside? Get on it. Tidy your bloody room.
Indeed, Rousseau was quite skeptical of the Enlightenment and mercantilism in general, and commercialism. He thought that it was property that made men unequal, and because men were unequal, all evils flowed from this. So essentially, Rousseau believed that in the state of nature, the noble savage, everyone was essentially virtuous until progress increased dependence and then led to a loss of independence and corruption. Property became the basis for inequality. That we were happier, healthier, stronger, and more independent in the state of nature. I mean, in a way, he's a bit of a wild man. You know what I mean? Like you can sort of imagine him like roaming the wilds of France, you know, dressed in a, you know, animal skin, just, you know, by himself, kind of. I mean, he was self-taught, so it is entirely possible that he very, very much distrusted learning. Indeed, some of his great quotes: "Trust your heart rather than your head." I'm pretty sure Ben Shapiro would look quite dimly on that quote.
He wouldn't get along with a lot of the IDW. Let's put it that way.
And I hate books. They only teach us to talk about things we know nothing about. Strong words there from Rousseau.
Yeah, for foreshadowing the coming Dunning-Kruger effect few centuries later.
For someone who wrote so many books, you know, it's
Don't fucking read. By the way, have you heard of my new book that's coming out? Not exactly a great marketer. Seems a bit like a kind of self-hating bourgeoisie type. So very much of the SJW kind that you're talking about.
Quite. Indeed, Rousseau is kind of the proto-SJW. He never really held government office or was close to those in government. He basically hung out with a bunch of French thinkers. So this might be the difference. Both Hobbes and I think Locke as well actually had contact with people who were actually running governments. Rousseau seems to have been completely disconnected from this process, and basically sat around, you know, whining about, you know, how inequality was, you know, a bad thing, and it all, you know, came out of property. The first man who, having fenced in a piece of land, said, quote, "This is mine," and found people naive enough to believe him, that man was the true founder of civil society. From how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortune, might not anyone have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes, or filling up the ditch, or crying to his fellows, "Beware of listening to this impostor, you are undone, and if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody." So, I mean, you know...
Bit of a dramatist, really.
But you can see echoes of this thought in, you know, in you know, hippie culture and in you know, in communism. It belongs to us all, man. Well, I mean, yeah, right. You know, I mean, but it doesn't really. Like, you know, that's you know, that's just a bit of a sort of clever word.
Just drop the acid for like half an hour and see if we don't crash back down to reality. Just leave it to one side. Park that acid for a moment and get some real ideas.
So, Rousseau's concept of the state of nature, as I've said, is that man was fundamentally nice and shiny and gentle and cooperative and all this kind of other stuff. I believe he based his idea on some of the anthropological texts coming out about certain Caribbean islands that were like uncontacted, you know, where like the white people like turned up and everyone's like lying around like, you know, eating mangoes, and everyone's like, "Oh wow, you know, we get along in harmony." Presumably, they don't see the violent parts of such societies. Nope. And so he had this idea that we are descended from it's essentially like a hippie commune, and you know, an anarchist commune where like everyone shares everything, and there is no land and there is no possessions. You know, he's basically like John Lennon. You know what I mean, right? Like,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, the thing is, he doesn't, even though he's a completely different author, and I know I keep bringing up Le Bon, but he doesn't seem to differ in Le Bon on that point. Le Bon being, you could say, an anthropologist, he had an interest in it. But the point I'm trying to make is, Le Bon saw that in the framing context of, oh, this is a primitive form of, you know, this form of communism is a primitive state of man. Whereas you have to wonder, would Rousseau have seen it as an ideal to move towards?
He did. He did see it as an ideal. And not only did Rousseau believe that society had corrupted man, but also that society could save man. Now, this, of course, is a very, very slippery idea because if man is essentially being corrupted by society, and society must be changed in order to make him better, then by definition, you could basically make the argument that society has to force people to be free. And indeed, he actually makes this argument. To protect the social compact from being a mere empty formula, therefore, it silently includes the undertaking that anyone who refuses to obey the general will is to be compelled to do so by the whole body. Rousseau, by this point, is talking about the general will, the majority will, which cannot be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This single item in the compact can give power to all the other items. It means nothing less than that each individual will be forced to be free. It is obvious how forcing comes into this, but to be free, yes, because this is the condition which, by giving each citizen to his country, secures him against all personal dependence, secures him against being taken by anyone or anything else. This is the key to the working of the political machine. It alone legitimizes civil commitments which would otherwise be absurd, tyrannical, and liable to frightful abuses. How exactly these ideas cannot be susceptible to frightful abuses is never really quite made clear. And indeed, totalitarian regimes have made this argument. There is quite a strong link between Rousseau and certain totalitarian regimes, because essentially the way
if we
he
just do
outlined
socialism my way,
yeah, but not only that, right? Like any
Okay.
tyrant can basically rig an election or fool the people, or you know, even legitimately be like, vote for me, I give you free ice cream. You all want the free ice cream, right?
Mhm.
And then he gets like 60% of the vote, and he is then suddenly like, well, I am the representative of the people. I am therefore the representative of the general will. I have therefore been legitimized. Anyone who doesn't like it, you got to be forced to be free. And
right.
it just goes fucking downhill from there, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's
There's
so
a bit of a
he,
cascade after that.
yes, it is.
Cascade of clusterfucks.
So he believed fundamentally that man was perfect up until the point at which he realized his differences to other men. There was a naturally good love of self, or the desire, for self-preservation, which he called amour de soi. Just soy.
Love of soy, is it?
It's S-O-Y, but actually that's really, really funny. The love of soy.
Did he legit do that?
He did. It's amour de S-O-Y, which in French I think means love of the self, but I'm totally going to like. So there was the love of the soy, versus, of course, self-love of vanity and pride, amour propre. I can't speak French. Modernity has fostered this self-love and has diminished our compassion. And thus, the realization of inequality between people is what drives us to be disconnected from our fellow man, and drives alienation and society and property, essentially, as is at the root of this. Now, of course, again, to link into communism, the idea that it is too much inequality that makes man bad. So contrast this with Hobbes, who is like, people just suck, right? And Rousseau, he's like, people are all right, but they often kind of suck, right? But Rousseau was like, oh, people are great. It's just society and inequality that makes them suck. And it's only a short hop, skip, and a jump to be like, well, if we abolished private property and forcibly got rid of inequality, everyone would be good to one another.
Yep.
Yeah, it hasn't really worked out that way, unfortunately.
No, it's a complete contrast between the general will of the people is embodied through the sovereign versus the general will of the people needs to be brought under fucking control of the sovereign. You get what I mean?
Yes. Well, I mean, he's really. I mean, I think he's fucking mad. Like, I mean, honestly, the idea that the state of nature is freedom and equality is, in my opinion, just complete crap, especially in sort of like, large populations. Is anyone free living under a warlord? Is anyone really free in the state of nature? I mean, you could say that as long as no one has technology and no one is stronger or, more charismatic, then yes, but of course that's not how it really works out. Rousseau makes very little mention of the natural differences between people. He mainly focuses on property and money and says that it is those things specifically that make men unequal, not the differences fundamentally in
the
ability.
individuals themselves. Yeah.
Correct. So he says, much like Locke and Rousseau, that self-interest will lead people to want to develop a society. And how do we do this? He is the social contract. And
I mean, you have to understand that, there is some truth to that, because men in the state of nature, I mean, there's got to be some midway between Rousseau and Hobbes where it's a case of people running around endlessly attacking one another, working for their own individual self-interest at all times. I mean, as soon as people start banding together, surely you start to see that Rousseau's team, as it were, looks stronger than Hobbes. If you've got team players, you have a team. Yes. Team trumps individual.
Well, this was Locke's formulation, which is why I personally think Locke was really onto something here. He charts, of course, midway between Hobbes and Rousseau. As I said before, Locke is like, people in nature they do work together, but things are liable to tip into a state of war, which is what what Hobbes would have called the state of nature. So Locke basically says that, yeah, Hobbes is correct. Shit can go that way, but it's not always that way. Whereas Hobbes was basically, and it's not unsurprising given Hobbes's life. His entire life was lived during a period of civil war, that he would think this. This was another one of Rousseau's points. Quite egotistically, he said that Hobbes and Locke did not truly understand the state of nature of man, but had merely impose their own ideas from their lives onto it. The idea that he was doing exactly the same seems to have flown completely over his, but it is really,
I know, right? Immense amount of, I don't even know the word, projection, you could say. I mean, there's some truth to it, obviously, you would imagine.
He's doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. In the like I say, having the luxury of being able to teach yourself new tasks and new skills. Great. Good for you. Not the same for everybody throughout history. You should maybe take that less for granted. Again, it just keeps coming back to this idea of, the SJW tweeting on their iPhone whilst getting a uni education about how horrible the entire bourgeoisie class is.
Yes. I have always found that the weirdest part of that kind of thing, the number of people who are like, we need to go back to the state of nature. I hate capitalism. I will tweet on my iPhone using the internet to express my displeasure.
I mean, they could at least use smoke signals to make it seem somewhat authentic, right? Like, I want to go back to nature. Oh, I'm going to do it with a fire.
Right, but what if the smoke signals use language which is part of a patriarchal white supremacist construct?
Oh, mate. Man.
I mean, that's the real question. I mean, if you use science to make fire, and science is a part of patriarchy and white supremacy, then I mean, really, I mean, can you just sit in the mud and freeze to death? Or is freezing to death also part of white supremacy? These are the really big questions that nobody.
And then you've got to ask about the climate change involved. And
yes. Seeing a lot of global warming recently. I have been freezing my ass off in the global warming. There has been so much global warming, actually. The price of gas in the US has spiked by 32,000%, if you can fucking believe that.
Yikes.
Holy shit.
Massive
Yikes. So anyway, to get back to Rousseau, Rousseau's solution to the problems of inequality, I'm sure this won't kill millions of people, is the social contract, where each person gives up all of their rights to a community of equals of which they are a member. nobody gets your rights, and therefore no one body or individual gets power over you, and we are all free. Now, how the fuck this is supposed to work, I have no freaking idea. Like, honestly, this idea just breaks my brain, because when I try and think this through, in reality, the first thing that occurs to me is someone just, oh, you know, I am the representative of the people. This is one of the things, right? So in Rousseau's conception of society, right, there would be no legislature, right? Every single thing is decided by direct democracy. Like literally every law. There is no legislature to draft the laws or anything like that. Every single law is decided by the people, people. And there is only a very small government that exists to carry out the laws decided by the people. Now, if our smarter viewers will realize that this is essentially a tyrannical structure whereby 60% of the population could essentially seize control of the machinery of the state and use it to persecute the other 40%. And this has been pointed out, and it is indeed true. There is no, but not only that, under Rousseau's conception or formulation, every single small law would have to be voted on by the people. Now, of course, this is just ridiculous, right? No one has the time. So in practice, what would happen is you would have
especially in
people,
Biden's America, where you're getting a new executive order every other week or so.
Oh,
just imagine the turnouts. I mean, again and again and again. All the new coronavirus measures are coming in. Let's have another referendum, shall we?
But let's think this through, right? Practically speaking, because people have to work and all this kind of like other stuff, you would simply get a small professional class of people whose job it was to follow all of the potential laws being made, right? And tell people which way to vote, which is basically the functional equivalent of a legislature, right? So you can't avoid these things happening, really. You know, you abolish these parts of government at your peril. It's like saying we will have a society where no man rules over another man. Yeah, well, good luck with that. I think history has shown that that's not really a practical thing, because humans are naturally hierarchical. I can hear the SJWs ringing, you know, from the other side of the country or the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. How dare you say that humans are hierarchical? I think there's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that this is actually true. You know, but not only that, humans are specialized, right? Because one person is better at understanding laws than another, because one person is better at speaking than another, because one person has more legitimacy or charisma. Inevitably, you get a situation where certain people rise to the top, either the scum or the cream. Depending on how you look at it, or the scheme, I guess. You know,
I mean, the thing about it is with the idea that there is no such thing as human hierarchy, naturally speaking, or that hierarchy is imposed on the people. It kind of assumes we're all part of one big amorphous blob, like an amoeba colony or something.
Well, yes, and again, so to sum up social contract theory in a sort of footnotey kind of thing, you don't have to go to university. Just listen to our podcast and you can sound extremely smart the next time you get in a conversation with someone. So Hobbes essentially said that the social contract is with one another. You make a contract with your fellow man to give up the rights to an independent sovereign, and that sovereign will decide all disputes between you. And this is very, very important, because if TSG and I, for instance, have a beef, and I'm like, TSG, you touched up my cow, and TSG is like, I didn't touch up your cow. It wandered into my field. And I'm like, oh, fuck you, buddy. And he's like, fuck you, buddy. You need an independent judge. You know, you go before the Jarl, you go before the king, and be like, he done touched up my cow. And, you know, TSG, like, I didn't touch your cow. He wandered into my field. You know, I don't know why I'm doing US accent, you know, whatever. So you use the sovereign as the impartial decider of these,
or you just have a massive cattle plague.
Yes, you know, but this is important, because if you and I cannot agree to go to the Jarl and have him settle the dispute, then sooner or later it will lead to a cow feud. And, I'll be creeping into your field at night with a shotgun and being like, oh, you touch my cow again, I'm going to shoot you up, and it'll lead to a small civil war between my family and your family. And then 200 years later, we'll still be fighting and no one will understand why. And I'll be like, oh, yeah, our families are feuding over you done touched up my cow,
Major realization coming up. All wars are the result of strange men touching up each other's cows. Directly or indirectly, in the chat, if you can prove it or disprove it, I dare you. I dare you. I really dare you.
TSG's overarching theory of history. You should write a book, man. The cow touching compact.
This is the thing, man. Like there was an actual like meme back in maybe 2011, 2012 because of a few libertarian texts available on Mises.org that basically the main problem that libertarians face was either who would build the roads or how do we actually handle all these goddamn cattle plagues. I'm not joking. This was a thing a few years ago.
Yeah,
it was absolutely hilarious.
It is these collective problems essentially that the state exists to solve, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a massive fan of the state. I think it's a necessary evil, but it is a necessary evil, right? That's why Locke would say, well, what you need is an armed populace to push back against the state. So if the state starts getting any funny fucking ideas, you can be, well, I got a whole shitload of guns. Shout out to my bros in Texas. Freedom, motherfucker. Do you speak it? Yes, they do.
Awesome segue, by the way.
Thank you very much. So to just to circle back, Locke believed that you made a contract with your fellow man to give up limited rights and then entrust those rights to the government and keep and bear arms to make sure that the government doesn't get any fucking funny ideas, right? You can rule us, right? You start getting any funny ideas, man. You're going to go up against me and Billy Bob with my AR-15, you know? And honestly, I think that Locke had the right idea because without an armed populace, there is really nothing to stop the government from being like, well, it's a crisis and we'd hate to restrict individual liberties, but it really is for your own good. So, everybody inside your fucking house now will let you out when we feel like it for your own good, obviously.
Obviously. Quite obviously.
As opposed to all of those governments that seize totalitarian power by saying, oh, yeah, we're just doing it because we want more power and we don't really give a fuck about the people. Many, many times through history have they said that. Rousseau was, you give up everything, but not to one person or group, but to everyone. Now, if that sounds fucking crazy, well, it sounds fucking crazy to me. I mean, it's just like what the fuck, and not only that, you give up all of your rights to everyone. I mean, not like a limited sort of rights, but to everyone. It's so diffuse. It's like, comrade, is this your factory? No, factory is owned by people. I just happen to run factory. But you are the guy who controls. No. Factory is owned by people. I am just borrowing factory from the people. You like to buy Swiss watch? I mean,
It's like a wristband turning itself inside out. That's the only thing I can come up with to try and explain what's going on there.
Yeah, it's mental. I honestly can't wrap my head around it, and I'm not the only person because when I was in class learning this stuff, I was like, is it just me that I can't wrap my head around this? But no one else in class could wrap their head around it either. And the teacher was like, yeah, it's pretty piss weak. Obviously, she didn't say that, but
piss weak. I'd love to be in your classroom, mate.
So this new compact or alienation produces a condition of equality. No
joke.
And there we go. We have the equality, but because all the rights are given up to everyone, they are given up to no one. Okay, that just sounds like sophistry to me. I mean,
it's very clever sophistry, though.
Yes,
you gotta love the way. Oh, Rousseau is so wordy, isn't he? He's so wordy.
Well, this is the thing. Rousseau divided the will of society into two parts. There was the will of all, which was the aggregation of private interests. So, the clashing wills, and the general will, capital G, capital W, have to capitalize these kinds of big philosophical concepts, obviously. And the general will is what is best for all. And basically, whatever the general will is, it cannot possibly be wrong. It is self-referential in that sense, right? So because 60% of the population believe it's the right thing to do, by definition, they are correct. This is a horrible idea that can just go so badly wrong. I mean, if you know anything generally about, popular delusions, the madness of crowds, the general way, a formulation I quite like to use is, if 60% of the population suddenly decided that they want to spend an entire country's financial reserves on M&Ms, so they could hold fill the entire center of London with M&Ms and have a big M&M festival. They throw M&Ms at one another. That might be what 60% of the people voted for, but that is not a fucking good idea. You do need government to be like, whoa there, Nelly, just whoa there, and of course this creates the problem that by definition this means that the government has to kind of control the general population a little bit. This is an unsurmountable problem, which is why ideally, again, you should have an armed populace, in my personal opinion.
For sure.
I mean, we don't have that in the UK, and look how well things are going here. The government definitely has not overstepped its power at all.
Oh, no. Let's not say that.
And if you don't like the coronavirus lockdowns, you are free to go on the internet and complain to random people.
That's it.
Which will not change anything, but might make you feel a little bit better. Just don't complain too hard, or you might get your ass cancelled. And to me, that really is liberty. It really 2021 version.
Yeah, it seems so bloody strange that a lot of the sort of sentiments you pick up whilst reading Rousseau seem to tag on, or map on rather, so accurately to the situation that people are in or expecting with this whole Great Reset thing. Whether it's conspiracy or official narrative is confusing as hell. But what it seems like we're moving towards is kind of what Rousseau has set out. And I mean, I'm not so sure how it's going to work. Well, because we said, it's a wristband turning itself inside out. It doesn't quite make sense.
It's not going to work.
It's a Mobius strip chasing its own tail.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the point. It doesn't fucking work. But this time they're going to have a crack at it with AI, because AI is magic, right? So they're going to try a command economy, but we've got AI. Yeah, you realize humans are smarter than AI for a start, and you will never get rid of perverse incentives. Don't get me wrong, it might run better than the USSR, but it's still not going to run as well as free people making their own decisions freely and exchanging with one another. The problem is, of course, that liberty, by definition, means inequality. Right? For so many reasons. If I am free to be a merchant and to spend all of my time, fucking trading Bitcoin or running a shop or, accumulating wealth, and another person is free to, take a gender studies course and shoot heroin and
touch up people's cows.
Then by definition, after 30 years, the person who worked their entire life, slaving away at a shop and, slowly and cautiously accumulating money for their children will be much wealthier than the gender studies grad who never got married and spent all of their time shooting heroin. Now, this is the essence of freedom. Freedom implies inequality. But Rousseau thought that equality was more important than liberty. And there we go. It's all fucking downhill from there, basically, as they say.
So all these complicated formulas he has basically boil down to a formula for bad stuff to happen. I mean, seriously. Yeah, it's really it's really, really bad. I mean, but at least we got on the Chiron down there. He at least acknowledges to some degree apathy is a problem. I mean, let's go with the example of an armed populace. What is the use of an armed populace that is completely apathetic towards what's happening around it? If they don't care what's happening, if they don't feel like they have any skin in the game, it's just as much as having an unarmed populace, arguably.
Well, look, I mean, look, I agree, right? You need to have people engaged with the political process, okay? But you can take it too far. Like, and look, the French Revolution showed this, like, actually really, really well. Everyone got so engaged in politics that, like, a lot of, like, just normal shit didn't get done. You know what I mean, right? It's a bit like what we've got today. Like, everyone's so fucking busy arguing on the internet that no one's actually keeping the fucking lights on, right? You need to ultimately, in my opinion anyway, have like a political class, right? In the same way you have like a, legislative class or whatever, you need a group of people who are interested in that, who are connected to the people, who can say to the people, listen, this is really, really bad. Everyone get up on your tables and, grab your guns. We're going to go and, fucking say hello
have
to
a
Parliament.
Paul Revere moment.
Exactly, right? But if everyone is engaged in politics all the time, right? For a start, it's not going to work. And for a finish, the truth of the matter is that a lot of people do not understand politics. I mean, it's complicated.
It would probably cause a lot of unnecessary violence.
Well, absolutely.
In my mind, I mean, the disagreements of the endless ballot boxes, how can that end with anything but a bunch of crowds just basically yelling at one another? And then eventually at the next ballot box coming, it just naturally, to me, it just seems to naturally escalate. I don't know, maybe I'm projecting because we have such, in our world at the moment, we have such a polarized society that just people disagree over anything, and suddenly it just keeps going up and up and up and getting scarier and scarier and scarier, and just more more of a fever pitch, emotionally speaking, where you just can't see any other way than what's going to happen. So I think there's got to be a limit with political participation, surely.
Well,
there's got to be some sort of threshold beyond which it becomes dangerous.
Well, I agree. And look, and people hate this formulation, right? Like, I get it, right? No one wants to be told what to think. It is, highly insidious, this idea that, the government should even slightly sort of limit your choices, right? But I think fundamentally there are some really, really bad ideas. And, I love liberty and stuff, but I think if everyone always engages in politics, you're just going to wind up getting a lot of people believing in very, very simplistic stuff. This is why democracy is good, right? People come up for a vote, once every, few years. Everyone makes their case to, the people, and the people get in that moment to make a determination. And then once it's over, everyone goes back and does stuff other than politics, unless of course in 2021, in which case it never gets decided and becomes this massive fucking running wound that just continues to create more division. But that is how it is supposed to work, right? So everyone participates, but they don't participate all the time, so that people are free to do other stuff, and this is what the government is supposed to do. It's supposed to guarantee your liberty, right? In both the positive and the negative sense. So positive liberty is things that you are free to do. Negative liberty are things that you are free from. It was Isaiah Berlin who came up with this formulation. Shout out to Isaiah Berlin. I think he's dead now, but he can probably hear me from beyond the grave. So in a classically liberal society, right, you are free to own your property, right? Yeah. Thank you, V. Exactly. Freedom from or freedom to. Very well said. So you are free to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You are free to go where you will. You are free to say as you will. You are free to worship as you will. But you're also free from the predations of your neighbor. You are free from violence. You are supposed to also be free from tyranny. The government is not supposed to arbitrarily arrest you or say that you have to spend an entire year fucking locked in your house with fucking recourse.
Not quite at the level where people are calling it house arrest, but it's getting to look that way.
I'm calling it house arrest. I'm calling it. I mean, this is basically house arrest. I'm not even getting an entire hour outside every day. And even the UN says, right, that you should get an hour of exercise a day. Now,
well, I mean, actually, that's an interesting thing to note is, things have gotten so polarized in recent years that people are probably participating a bit too much. And Corona is now just the next big thing that people are polarized about. because
speaking
I mean, I
speaking of,
can't tell you the number of people, the number of incidents I just see online where people obsess over the position they have. They don't listen necessarily to the other side, and it's that constant pressure almost to do so and engage in these arguments again and again and again that I can only see it really fraying relationships between people.
oh
And I
yeah,
think honestly, if we had a society like this pre-technology, maybe it'd be different. But you know, people would still probably find reason to pick apart the tiniest little thing to agree with or disagree with someone over.
look, man.
If you had endless political participation, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, politics and religion are quite similar, right? I view like what's happening at the moment a bit like what went down between the Catholics and the Protestants, right? So
Mhm.
Catholicism and Protestantism are essentially two different ways of looking at the universe. And they eventually reached a point where they could not even agree on very, very fundamental definitions of, you know, what is good and what is bad, what is God, what isn't God, and everything sort of just broke apart. And I'm seeing that now. It's quite disturbing.
Mhm.
This
Yeah.
kind of polarization. And so for example, I posted a thing about how uh there's a good chance that masks might actually wind up contributing to cancer because not only are you breathing in cheap plastic fibers from cheap plastic masks, but you're also constantly re-inhaling bacteria from the mouth, and your
Oh, for
lungs
sure.
are supposed to be sterile.
Mm.
And the reply I got back was an article on how people who don't wear masks share psychopathic traits. No, sorry,
What?
sociopathic traits.
Okay, socio. Yeah. Okay, it's a
Presumably
big
because
difference.
they don't care that Granny will die,
Mm.
which is a terrible formulation. I care that Granny will die, right? But my caring has solid limits, right? Like
Mhm. Mhm.
this idea, and again to go back to Rousseau, this idea of like a universal sort of fixed morality that trumps everything else, right? Like
Mm.
what people don't tend to ask is like, oh, you want Granny to die? Well, no, but how much of my life am I supposed to give up exactly, right? Like
Mm.
if Granny, if I just, you know, I don't know, if it's 2 weeks out of my life and Granny doesn't die, fine. If I have to be locked inside for, you know, under house arrest for the rest of my fucking life so that
Whilst
Granny
wearing a
doesn't
face
die,
nappy.
I'm a bit like, well, you know, but this is the problem with these sort of expansive moral principles. This is a wholly good thing, and whatever we have to do that good thing
Mm.
is worth it. Even if we have to kill hundreds of thousands of people, potentially, you know, we have fulfilled this moral principle. So I'm not a big fan of too much moral principle in government. Obviously, you've
Mm.
got to have like a little bit so that, you know, people aren't just like, oh, let's make a shitload of money selling fucking heroin laced candy to children. You know, like
Yeah.
obviously that's not a good idea. But you got to take a nuanced view of these things, right? Everything is a trade-off. You can never do a good thing like for some people without hurting other people. And I have noticed a distinct lack of realization of this with the COVID lockdown. Like, oh,
Mm.
this is 100% a good thing. We're saving lives. Well, no, you're just saving some lives and destroying a whole bunch of other lives.
Mm.
But you're just going to highly privilege and focus on the lives that you are saving and completely ignore the lives that you are crushing or impoverishing.
Yeah,
I
and
would
the other thing as well is it's such an immersive thing. Like as soon as you wear the mask, as you say, it's over your face. It's you're literally breathing it in. And
oh yeah.
it's intense and it's palpable. It's something that you know you're doing and can feel good about because you're participating at that level.
I
Right?
actually go a step further, and I have sewn my lips and nostrils up. You know, I really feel that you know, and put on a plastic bag.
Mm.
I hear they block 100% of germs, so you know, very, very, very effective.
Yeah.
You might die, but at least you won't infect anyone else, and that's
Right.
really what's important. You know, valuing your own life and mental health over someone else's is, fundamentally sociopathic, I'm afraid. How dare you value your own life, property, and liberty over someone who you've never fucking met? I mean, what the fuck, dude? Like, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, and this is fucking Rousseau as well, in a nutshell, right? Like,
I mean, it kind of reminds me, there's an old adage about the personal is political, the private is political. Everything that happens that you do is an act of power, essentially. And to some extent, I agree with that. But to focus on it 100% of the time, to focus on it 100% of the time will drive you straight into paranoia very, very quickly. And it's, then it becomes very easy to utilize and turn citizens against one another by asking, could you just let us know if someone's not wearing a mask? Or could you just let us know if so has a visitor that you don't think you've seen before, right?
Yep.
It becomes really sinister. Oh, could you just tell us what your parents are up to, little girl or little boy? Becomes seriously, seriously insidious when you start to really look at what's going on.
Yep.
Starts with paranoia.
Snitches are bitches. And the widespread snitchification of society is one of the worst developments. Nice one, Tom. Texas is beautiful. If you put your head up your fifth point of contact, I hear that works pretty well. Indeed, it does. A little hard to communicate, but if you yell loud enough, you can get some muffled noise.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is a different kind of wristband turning itself inside out altogether.
Of course, power is what it's all about. You can thank the fucking postmodernists for that shit.
Right.
Seeping generally into the left. We really should do an episode actually on the four faces of power. That would make
I imagine we'll get to that at some stage. Yeah. Just to illuminate the sickening of the population. I said this actually fairly recently, that whatever your views on the virus are, the sickness has been palpable for some years now. The sickness that we're actually going through is bigger than just the virus, and it's been going on for longer.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, this is tyranny, right? It is absolutely tyranny, right? In the classical definition of the sense, who are you going to complain to, right? Oh, the law is unjust. Well, tough shit. We got all the guns, we got all the power. We'll meet like in a couple of months, maybe over video chat. Oh, can I participate in the meeting? No, get fucked. I mean, if that is not tyranny, I literally don't know what is. People just think that tyranny is only the knock at the door at 3 a.m. You know what I mean? The boot on the testicles, right?
Yeah.
But tyranny can be much more subtle than that. Tyranny is essentially unaccountable power.
Oh, but Chris, it's the representation of the general will of the people. People are, yeah. What are you going to do now? How can you possibly?
Yeah.
How can you possibly justify it that way?
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
Exactly. 60% of people believe that you should be oppressed. So, by definition, it's the right thing to do. Rousseau has leaked very, very clearly into a lot of, political formulations in the modern
ideologies.
Day. Particularly, I mean, you see all these fucking Antifa fucks. This is what democracy looks like. No, it's not. Take a politics class. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, stop marching. Stop doing meth. Right? And go and actually study like the fucking 17th and 18th century. You do not live in a direct democracy. You live in a fucking representative democracy. There is a big fucking difference. Then again, never argue with people chanting slogans. You're never going to get anywhere.
It's a fair point, actually. It's a very fair point. It's almost like being on Twitter. Funny story, just as a side note, I set up a Twitter account actually to try. I deleted mine ages ago and then tried to set one up maybe a month or two ago. I left it because, I didn't leave it. I just rage quit it because the format had changed so much. I couldn't actually figure out how to even search other people's accounts. So I thought after 2 hours, I'm not going to do this. I came back to it recently, logged in, and my account has been suspended.
They saw you coming, mate. They saw you coming. They have like a new AI now, probably, that's like psychic.
Yeah.
Took one look at you and was like, nah, don't trust that motherfucker. Ban him. ban
What
that
do you mean he
motherfucker
tried to
right
search
now?
for other accounts to follow? No, he is gone.
I wonder if Twitter has like a trust and safety pre-crime division. You know, where they're just
Trust and safety pre-crime.
they'll ban you because they think it's highly likely you're going to say something spicy. You know?
Oh man, all the terror watch lists they have, and they're going to focus on the terror the Twitter pre-crime thing. Pre-crime thing. Hello.
Pre-crime.
Cream Prime. Get it now from your local cow toucher.
It sounds like a Twitter porn channel, to be honest.
Yeah.
Subscribe to Cream Prime.
Oh dear. One way or another, it's pretty messy, I imagine.
Oh, I'm sure.
Whichever end of the thing you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. The UK government have said like on the 22nd of February they're gonna start talking about how they're gonna like lift the lockdown. And I suspect they're basically going to say like, oh, we'll lift it as the weather starts warming up, which is quite interesting because presumably that'd be the point at which everyone would start ignoring it anyway. So maybe they're doing that thing where they're like, well, if we just let people do a thing, it'll undermine our authority. So best that we come out front ahead of it and say, we magnanimously have allowed you to do the thing that we know you would do anyway. You know?
Yeah. Hey guys, I have this wonderful idea.
We have allowed the sun to rise in the morning. And everyone's like, oh yes, very, very good. Wow, that's like amazing.
Dear government, I had this amazing idea. Okay, that's cool. Let's carry on. And by the way, we just had an amazing idea. Yeah. Oh gosh. I've seen that in so many shows over the years.
Dude.
But it's actually playing out now. It's some stuff that you used to see as a joke on TV. And you just think, why did I laugh at that now? Because this is becoming legit. I don't know. Yeah. I had this theory when I was younger that basically everything that we take seriously now, at one point or another, started out as a joke. I mean, take Dogecoin, for instance. Apparently went up like 200% recently. Obviously, it's still pennies, but...
Oh, Dogecoin's gone up more than 200%, man. Dogecoin has like...
Legit?
Exploded, yeah, like legit.
Damn.
Fucking like lost its shit and gone like to the moon, as the Bitcoin traders say. You know, stonks, Doge stonks. Yeah, you know, and look, and more power to the people who have made money off Dogecoin, and generally Absolutely. The people who have made money off crypto. Generally, it's a very democratizing force. You know, unlike the sort of the stock market or the Forex market, where it's basically only the rich people who keep getting richer, crypto is extremely democratizing. You know, it's a game that everyone can play. And because it's sort of an open and distributed network, you don't have a certain class of people sitting on their Bloomberg terminals who get all the fucking information like a couple of minutes before everyone else. Everyone gets the information at the same time. The market is very flat like that, you know?
For sure. We should make it clear, by the way, this is not a channel for financial advice. If you take anything and run with it, it's your call. It's your choice.
Right. But more importantly, we would like to point out that if you are the kind of person who gets financial advice from a comedy podcast about political theory, maybe we're not the ones who have the problem. You know, maybe you should, you know, look into doing your due diligence, perchance.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know, like... I mean, you may as well get like fucking trading advice from like random hobos in the street. Apparently, actually, before the 1920s crash, that was actually like a thing.
Really?
Like, yeah. Like homeless people would be giving out like stock tips.
Well, you've got to remember, right, that hobos in America, traditionally speaking, they were people who just rode the trains to get work in different places. And I don't know when they outlawed that. But basically, that would, to me, that makes a bit more sense because if you think about it, they've just come from a completely different place, a completely different city. They're going to have information for you. So maybe the government at the time did like a paid hobo scheme to spread information around the US. I don't know. It's totally possible.
Hey, buddy,
it seems possible anyway.
You want some hot shitcoin tips? You gotta figure it out. Fuck, man, the future is fucking weird.
It is, yeah. Right. We're living through it. But at this point, I think I have to think ahead here. We are reaching the hour that we usually broadcast until. I want to thank everybody who showed up today. You've been amazing. We've had amazing stuff in the chat. We've had likes pouring in. Quite frankly, I am very impressed with how this one's gone. And everybody seems a lot of you people out there seem to have stuck with us till the very end. I'm so
Indeed.
impressed. I am so happy. I do want to emphasize again the likes, the subscriptions, any shares you make, all completely welcome. All love that stuff, all engagement. But at the moment, my main priority is I want to be able to do a review when I hit 100 subs, assuming the future is bright and orange to me like that. I want to know exactly how to make this channel better. I want to know exactly what makes you tick, what makes you turned off. I want to know what to do next so that I can make the experience better for you and that I can put out better content and build on that myself. So
Yes.
at which point I think we should move on to shout outs. Shout out to all the Speakers Corner crew. Shout out to everybody in the chat we've had this evening. We've had some very interesting threads going on. Texas is beautiful. Lewis, the Libertarian. We've had Mr. Kioch. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Seven, or VII, as it were, and a couple others. We've had such a great time doing this, and we're going to move on next week to why radical feminists can't handle Jack Donovan, and I will hope you tune in for that. But yeah, shout over to Mr. Carrion. Any shout outs you want to make?
Shout out to We Are Change. Shout out to the Liberty Channel, my comfy home away from home. Shout out to all of my Amero bros and my Texas peeps. Stay strong, guys. Shout out to Kat. Love you, baby. Shout out to Base Department and the Speakers Corner crew. I think we already shouted them out. They get too, because they're such lovely, special, comfy people. You know? Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Distributed Warfare. Spicy memes for the masses. And is it Thursday?
Yes, on Thursday we put it out.
On Thursdays, TSG and I do a podcast called News Fist on Odyssey. Odyssey is a platform like YouTube, but better, but it doesn't have the user base. So if you want to help us, another thing you could do is go and sign up for Library and search for News Fist, and please subscribe.
Get in now while it's good. Get ahead of the curve, Scrubs. Come on. You know you want to.
Yeah. No, Library Odyssey is actually really, really cool. Like, if you guys all remember what YouTube was like before the algorithm took over and just flooded it with shit, Odyssey, there's actually some really, really cool stuff on there. So I would highly recommend getting over there. Ditch YouTube. You know, vote with your eyeballs.
There are still things to be excited about in the world nowadays. People, get on Telegram, get on Odyssey, BitChute, whatever works particularly well for you. Just make sure you do something to keep your life spicy during lockdown.
Fight back against big tech, he says, being broadcasted on YouTube, the very platform that he is.
I think we've come full circle, mate. I think we've come full circle.
No, I'm on a revolutionary, mate. That's why we're streaming on fucking YouTube, right? we are using the tools of the very system we seek to undermine in order to undermine the system. Wow,
keep
man.
Calm and carrying. The revolution is coming. The revolution is absolutely on its way. Okay, we are going to round off on that note, guys. Again, thank you so much. Comments will be appreciated. Comments will be read and taken on board. So thank you all for coming, and have a pleasant evening.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.